Hi, welcome back, Precision Camera Facebook viewers. It's Fabulous Film Friday, and today our topic is all about film. It's going to be a little rundown about film itself and the formats available, and a little bit about the cameras that use it. I myself, Ian, am a photographer who uses both digital and film cameras. Many of you may be inspired to try film at times like this because you have some spare time, or it's something that you've always been curious about, or it's something that you've done in the past and you miss it and you want to try it again. I would say that film is probably one of my favorite things in terms of how it looks, and in a lot of ways I like the cameras that use it. I definitely think that digital has advantages, and certainly if you're the kind of shooter who is very much product oriented, film is probably not where you want to be to start with. In other words, with a film camera, a lot of the joy people get is in the imperfection of it. It's simply not the most ideal thing in the world if what you want to do is produce a perfect image on the first try and know you've got it. But I love film for a lot of different reasons, and going through school I spent a lot of time running roll after roll through my camera, developing in the darkroom, printing. All of those things were really enjoyable, and I really like the results. So I'm not here to tell you whether or not it's exactly the right thing for you, but if you've always been curious and maybe you wanted to try it out and you're not familiar, the first thing I'm going to do is explain a little bit about film itself. So the films we sell in our store, and most modern films today, come in roughly 2 to 3 varieties. We have what we call 35 millimeter film, which is the standard format for most handheld cameras. And we have something called 120 or 2 1/4 film, which is a larger format. The major difference is the kind of cameras that you need to use them are going to be different cameras, and the 35 millimeter camera tends to take a whole lot more pictures per roll, so you don't have to change the film as often. The larger format, the 120 film, or what we call 2 1/4, this kind of film is bigger. Bigger film means more detail, and more detail means more enlargeability. So if you're really curious to see the potential of film, one thing you can do is look at 120 or medium format as an option to make prints bigger than, say, 16 by 20, or to crop a photo, or just to see an amazing amount of texture and detail. Now, having said that, 35 millimeter film has evolved to a stage now where it's as good as it's ever been. Ironically, with the digital camera market virtually taking over entirely, the film camera market was never better when that started to happen. So what we call emulsions, or what they coat the film with, are as good a quality as one could have ever bought in the whole history of photography. Meaning your 35 millimeter films are pretty amazing, even compared with the 120s in some cases. There's also 4x5 film, which is 4 by 5 inches rectangular. I'm not really going to profile that today. The cameras that use it are pretty tricky to work with and not really good for any sort of handheld photography for the most part. If you want to pursue that, it's an excellent way to take pictures, and we do sell the film in our store. But today I'm going to concentrate on the other formats to discuss. Now, among other things, when you choose to shoot film, you choose a few different things other than the format. And one of the choices you're going to make is black and white or color film. So black and white film comes in a few flavors. Let's see, we're going to go to a little more detailed close-up here. And I'm going to show you some different films. We handle films from 2 companies primarily, Ilford and Kodak. They are similar in a lot of cases. I wouldn't say one's better than the other, but Kodak is pretty much the long-standing favorite of a lot of enthusiasts based on reputation, of course, and loyalty to the brand. So you have over here Tri-X 400, which is pretty much the most widely used black and white emulsion I think that there is. It has beautiful grain structure, good detail, and it's rated at ISO 400. So what that number means is that you've got a film sensitivity that works pretty good in almost any lighting condition, whether it be bright sun or shade or even an interior photo, okay? So a lot of the films I'm going to show you today are in that 400 category. T-Max film is a little different. The grain structure is based on something called T-grain. So when you enlarge it, the quality of the image looks a little different. Contrast is a little lower. Detail might be even a little finer. So these are two flavors of the same kind of thing. And analogous to that, in the Ilford brand, you have HP5, okay, and your Ilford Delta. So these kinds of films are somewhat similar in terms of the quality they duplicate and the grain structure and the versatility, okay? So I'm not necessarily a Kodak guy or an Ilford guy per se. I've used both and I think they both look really great. And Ilford offers a couple films that are more unique to the brand. XP2 here is a black and white film that goes through a different process. It's color process black and white. What does that mean? Well, when you process color and process black and white film, typically the developing system is different, and it's usually a little cheaper to get color developing and a little faster. So if you want to experiment with black and white, this might be a good film to try out. The emulsion does look a little different, but it's an alternative where you can't get black and white developing. And then this is just Ilford 100 Delta. So that means this film is a little bit less sensitive to light, a little bit better for the enlargement than the 400, because the higher these numbers go, the more grainy the image becomes when you enlarge it. And they also even make a 3200 ISO film, okay? So this emulsion is the most sensitive you can buy, and the grain structure is pretty pronounced. So I'd say that's not as ideal for enlargement, but it's a beautiful film to work with if you like to shoot at night or indoors without flash. You have a lot of fun. So these black and white films we offer in our store are typically stocked in both 35mm and the 120. And in some cases we sell them individually and in what's called a pack, where we get several rolls together. So these are all films that you may want to try out if you're curious as to how black and white might be suited and it's your taste to shoot that. Then we have color films, which come in several emulsions and styles. One of my favorites for people starting out is Ultramax and Fujifilm. The packs are 3 rolls. In the case of the Kodak, you get 3 of 24, and in the Fuji, you get 3 of 36. This one's rated at 200 ISO, so it needs a little more daylight than the 400 ISO you see here from Kodak. Now, as color films go, they have pretty vibrant color. I understand, you get a little better detail out of the Fuji than the Kodak, but they're very punchy and very beautiful films to start off with in photography. I think, when you're looking at running film the first time, let's just say that even the best of us make a lot of mistakes, and it's typically good to get some test rolls through a camera and really get a feel for how to set up the exposure and everything. I would probably start here. Not to say that black and white isn't a wonderful alternative, but if you're going to make mistakes in photography, color developing again is less expensive, and these pack film sets of packs are very affordable and very versatile, so you can use them for all kinds of different things. And they're in the category of color negative, okay? Now, back in the day, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, what do you want, probably had slides or showed you slides, and those are called positives because when you shoot the film through the camera, what comes out of it is not a negative. You don't get the same result. You get a thing and you get it mounted into a little holder that can be put in a viewer or a slide projector. So some people like the color of that so much they choose to shoot slide film and produce images from that. So these are positive films rather than negative films. This is Velvia 50, arguably the most vibrant film ever created for a camera. And this is Provia 100F, a slightly more neutral, very, very fine grained film, very good for enlargement. These films are fabulous for someone who's got a little skill and isn't afraid to get in and make some images with some really beautiful color and detail. But if you make mistakes with positive film, there's no one in a darkroom who can fix them. So if, again, you're starting out and you're a little new to photography, there's no forgiveness for that. You probably would want to put these on the later scale and maybe try them after you've tried a couple rolls of negative film. Or give it a shot, but I know when I shot slides, I quite often threw away 30% of them just because I made a lot of mistakes in the exposure. And I had a much easier time with the negative film. If you move into professional grade films, there are quite a number of those available on the market. My favorite is probably Kodak Portra. This is 400 ISO, but it's one of the best films out there for color accuracy, skin tone reproduction. It's got an amazing exposure gamut, so you don't have to be exactly right with your exposure when you develop and print this stuff. It has a huge latitude. It's great for scanning, which I'll get into in a minute, and it has the ability to go to a higher ISO through a means called rating. Some people love a film like this and they say, well, today's really an 800 ISO day and I want to make this film work like as if it were made that way. And you could set your camera up and tell the camera to expose this like 800, and then when you drop it off at the lab, they do what's called push process, and they change the developing time a little bit, and it magically develops as if it were 800. So this film, I've heard people rating this film up to 6400 ISO and even higher, and it still holds up. So it's a very, very versatile thing. This is a 5-pack of the 120, so you can buy it like that, or you can buy it in the 35 millimeter rolls, and we have them available as well. Fuji makes a Pro 400H, also a very good film. Again, very versatile in exposure, latitude, excellent color. I think this is a little more neutral toned than the Portra, but this is basically Fuji's answer to Portra, and it's of equal quality and very similar in that these films tend to cost a little bit more, so it's a little more of an investment to go with a Portra or 400H, but I believe firmly that it's worth it. Once you get a taste for film, you're going to want the good stuff, and maybe after you've had some practice, or if you feel more confident in the way you control a camera and exposure, then these are a perfect way to get started, and we handle these again in 120 and 35 millimeter. So a lot of different emulsions and a lot of different types. The last one I'm going to talk about is Color Ektar 100, which is a great professional color daylight film, a little less expensive than the Portra and a little more generic as far as it's more neutral toned. So as far as color and quality is concerned, this is really, really super stuff and something that you might want to try out yourself if you are inclined to shoot in good daylight or on a tripod and you want a bigger enlargement. I think the grain structure of this is a bit finer than even the Portra. And believe me, that's not all of the films we sell. That's a pretty good chunk, but I did want to go through that. And I wanted to show you a little bit of a comparison in terms of what film looks like versus digital by using some slides. So we're going to switch over to that briefly so y'all can see exactly what we're talking about in terms of a comparison between, you know, what is it we're going to get with this film that we couldn't get with digital, or how characteristically does it look different. So there's some things about that that are certainly worth noting, and it's something that I like to show because without being able to see those things in comparison, you know, you're left trying to imagine it. You know, the internet's full of blogs and sites that show film photography, and they show great examples of it. So you can definitely go online and say, you know, even type in the name of a kind of film, and wow, people post a lot of images. So we're going to just switch over here briefly to a comparison of some slides. Here we go. Let me get this up and running for you. Perfect. Okay. Sorry, cut off a little off the screen there, but let me go ahead and go to the next slide. See if I can get that rolling. Hang on. Click into this one here. There we go. Okay, bear with me. Anyway, I made these slides earlier today using some images that we had gathered that I thought might be appropriate. Let me just see if I can bring up this one full screen for you, and we'll talk about that one first. Hang on just a moment. Let's see. Let's see here. There we go. Well, I guess I'll do it like this with the preview on. Anyway, you can see what's going on here. The image that I'm talking about is this one here on the left, which is a black and white film photograph, I believe with Tri-X film. And what you're seeing is an image of a, looks like a jogger moving past a building with a reflection. So that's what's going on here, why you see two of everything. And I went in with a tighter frame to enlarge part of the image. So this is cropped out of a smaller section of it, and as you can see, there is a bit of grain structure there. Basically what it is if you look real closely, you'll see a dappled effect caused by the pixels that are light and dark, and those little individual pixels are really grains of silver halide. So this is an organic exposure system. It's based on a chemistry, and silver halide goes back to the original photographers. So that's something that's been with us for nearly 100 years or more. Anyway, the grain structure on Tri-X is really beautiful. The edges, when you enlarge things, are a little soft here because this is from a 35mm negative, but I think they look beautiful in the fact that they look grainy in a particular manner. Now that's an aesthetic choice, that's what I like, but that's characteristic of what some people really get excited about with film, okay? And then I'm going to show you a slide next that'll be a image of, let's see here, we'll go to the color film. So same concept, this is I believe an ISO 400 or an 800 color emulsion. And you know, when you look at it overall, you get a sense of the color being very subtle, and there's very beautiful tone in some of this area where you see this misty water from the fire hoses from these firefighters. And then I pulled in on a detail of the helmets of the firefighters, and you can see there the grain structure again, very fine, but the edges again have a certain soft quality that looks granular. So again, when you enlarge film, it kind of gives you a different effect in terms of detail, and that detail can be softer than an enlargement from a digital camera. Okay, so a digital camera looks like this enlarged. So this image, I just stuck with firefighters, what the heck. These helmets you see right here are from this small section in the middle. And again, you see detail sort of fall apart, but in this case, it's not granular, it's pixelated. And the edges of things have these little stair steppies, this little bit of geometry. And that's something that you can definitely notice when you enlarge digital photos versus film, is the way digital softens in a very different manner. So it's not organic. It's very much something that'll show an edge with individual squares. And if you were going in far enough, you'd be able to make out each individual pixel. And I'm not going to take you quite that far. But side by side, the enlargement changes in tone and quality and even in color. So within this grain structure, there's more different colors in the shadows than you'd see in a digital photo. Anyway, these are just some basic comparisons I wanted to give you so you could kind of get a feel for what film looks like. Again, probably the best thing to do is look at some good comparisons online and maybe look up your favorite photographers and see what their work looks like. But any photographer that worked before about 2001 or 2002 most likely was shooting some form of film. So it's real easy to find examples. One thing that you might also consider doing is scanning your film. So one of the things we do a lot for our customers includes not only taking this stuff through chemistry and developing it to produce the negative, but we'll also, in our photo lab, in a lot of cases, take it and scan it through using our high-resolution scanning system to produce a digital photo. Now, you're thinking, well, that defeats the whole purpose, right? It's a film camera. Film digitized, why don't I just start with a digital camera file? Well, again, it's going to look different. It's going to have different qualities. But if you digitize it, you have the option to take that digital file and share it digitally if you're inclined. A lot of folks just drop these off, have them developed, and say, you know, I've got this roll through, pretty confident, it looks good, print it. A photographic print is really something to behold. If you haven't printed something in a long time, it's probably a good time to think about it if you're going to shoot some film, because one of the best parts of the effect is something that you wouldn't notice digitally. So it's great if you want to take, you know, you're developing through all the way to printing all in one shot, or you can say just develop the film, check the negatives, and pick your favorites and have those printed out. So we're pretty flexible here on how our lab does things. And as far as developing on your own is concerned, I've got mixed feelings about that as well. I've developed black and white film very successfully many, many times. It's not a big hassle and it doesn't require that many things in terms of chemistry, but you do have to have a dark and closed space, and you have to learn to work with things in absolute darkness to load film on canisters and stuff. So if it's in the vicinity of something you can do in your household, or you have a special place set up for it, it's worth a shot. And I don't think it requires a whole lot of practice to get very good at it. But color developing, on the other hand, can be a big can of worms, mostly because it requires lots of chemistry that's kind of hard to source, and especially if you're just trying to go down the street and buy it. It has to be set at very specific temperatures to get the right results, and it's not very forgiving at all if you make mistakes. It can produce a very good result as well, but it would probably be in the category of things that might not be worth it unless you're going to do a large volume of that developing. You would simply waste too much chemistry trying to develop a few rolls of film every other week. So it's better for a lab to do that for sure. So when it comes to developing and printing, there's a lot of different options. Precision Camera really offers fantastic service. So I'm going to talk about how you can get advantage of that a little later. I'm going to switch gears for a moment and talk to you a little bit about the contraptions we put the film into, namely cameras. I have a small collection of cameras that I take pictures with when I use film, and for the most part I shoot 35mm, but I brought some samples today of medium format as well, and a lot of these cameras are just right out of our inventory. Now you might say, well, who makes film cameras these days? And the answer is almost nobody does. Unfortunately, when manufacturers turn toward digital cameras, they largely quit producing film cameras. So there's really only a couple companies out there that currently make a high quality, versatile film camera. But that may be changing, you know. In the meantime, there's lots of people who have gotten rid of or don't use or inherited a film camera. They bring them to the store in a lot of cases because they want to trade them in for a digital. They're not using it anymore. And when we get a camera that's in good condition that we can take in and resell, we do so. We do pay very careful attention to quality. So every camera that we resell as a used camera is checked point by point for accuracy of exposure with the shutter, tested down to the millisecond, and make sure the film winding mechanism works, all sorts of things. So these cameras I'm showing you are basically good to go. You just load them up and roll. The first one I'm going to show you over here, I'm going to bring it over into the table area so we can see a little closer. Let's see here. Is the Leica 3. This is my own personal Leica film camera. This is a rangefinder camera. Rangefinder cameras are really cool, and they were the original 35mm cameras. This one was built just after World War II in the 50s, and there are a few floating around out there you can find from before then. Those are very, very collectible and very expensive. This camera has a viewfinder right here on the back, one that lets you see through a little window above the lens, okay? And that's different from the other type of camera that's more common these days called an SLR. Now a rangefinder camera like this is fully manual. It has manual exposure, manual shutter speed, manual focus, and manual wind. It doesn't even have anything called a light meter, you know, the way we check the exposure before we shoot. So shooting with these cameras can be a little different if you're used to something that's quick and automatic. This is about as far from it as you can get. And Leica is really well known for their optics. So these German-made lenses use a really fine grade of optic that's capable of capturing and rendering the most subtle details of shadow and highlight. So even this technology that's, you know, 60, 70 years old is still really great by even modern standards. And these cameras have changeable lenses, so I can unscrew this camera lens and replace it with a different one if I so desire, and I'm able to use different types of optics. So Leica is a really fun brand to photograph with because their quality is so highly regarded and their cameras are really durable. This is probably not the best brand for you if you're looking for something very economical, although cameras of this particular variety can be had for under $500. And I like mine an awful lot, and I use it occasionally when I have a little more time to photograph and I'm not in a big hurry, because it does take a little more time to work with, mostly because I'm not in good practice. This is a similar sort of thing. This is a Contax rangefinder that we acquired recently. It's been checked and reworked so that it's in perfect shape, and it's available for purchase at our store. It's another German brand, and Leica and Contax were always kind of the rival brands for most of the 20th century, and it's just as good in terms of optics. It has a little bit of different design and mechanics, but this unit goes for $349. So if you want to have the coolest looking camera in the neighborhood, there you go. Get this thing, because this has been maintained. It's in great shape. Looks like it came out of the box a day ago, and it's probably 60 years old. So those are rangefinder cameras that use 35mm negative or positive film. This is also a rangefinder. Now this camera was manufactured up until about 20, maybe 18, 20 years ago. This is called a Mamiya 7. So like the Leica camera and Contax camera, it has a viewfinder on the back. but you look at the world through a window outside of the lens. Now, why would you want a rangefinder camera? Well, these viewfinders on all these cameras are brighter than the ones on single lens reflex cameras. It can be tricky to work with telephoto lenses on these, but it's really great if you like wide angle shots, and the optics can't be beat. They're super quiet because they don't have mirrors that slap up and down. So when you click the shutter in a rangefinder camera, it's seldom easy to hear. I don't know if anybody out in streaming land can hear that, but that's all the shutter noise you get. And the great thing about the Mamiya 7 is that it uses the 120 film. So this uses the large format stuff, and that means it produces a negative Texas sized. Yeah, this whole thing is where the negative would be. So that's virtually 4 times the size of a 35 millimeter negative, meaning you get infinity kinds of detail out of that. So this camera, well, it was very, very popular when we were selling film cameras primarily, and they're still popular. This camera costs $3,500, and you'd say, well, that's an outrageous amount, but I'd say they're darn near collectible. They're a little hard to come by. This one's in beautiful condition. Its owner also kept up with it very nicely. Hardly a mark on it, and believe me, that's not always true when we get in secondhand equipment. So you're thinking, well, I like that 2 1/4 idea, but 3,500 might be a little steep for me. Understood. Don't worry, that is just one of the extremes. This is also a 2 1/4 camera from Mamiya. This is the much more widely used and sold Mamiya 645, the negative of which is still large and still beautiful. This right here. So it's going to be a little bit smaller than the 6x7 out of the rangefinder, but these cameras are cool because you can take and load film into this thing. It's called a film back, and I can place this film back on my camera, and I can go through and shoot a roll of, I don't know, let's say black and white film, or maybe half a roll, and then I can stop, and if I have another film back, I can switch out and change film formats, which is a pretty handy thing if you're the kind of shooter who likes to shoot different types of film. Now, all of these cameras are still pretty much manual, so you'll find on them shutter and aperture controls. Okay, this is the shutter dial, this is the aperture ring. The other Mamiya has that. But these cameras, you start to find light meters because they're a little more recent. So if you don't want to have to work without a light meter in your camera, that's a pretty good solution in the 2 1/4 like this. And you're thinking, well, those look nice, but I don't think I have it in me to carry them because, well, they're kind of big, you know. This isn't something that goes into, you know, a shirt pocket for sure, and even a camera bag for these is kind of large. I think they're definitely worth carrying, but, you know, there's a lot of people who would much prefer something like this, but in a 35 millimeter, and that's where you get your classic SLRs, okay? So these were the mainstay of the market for, yeah, I'd say most of the time we were shooting primarily film. So cameras like this are called SLR cameras because if you take off the lens, you can see a mirror inside the camera body. And the reason you need a mirror in here is so that light coming through the lens can be reflected and seen directly through the viewfinder. And that is the pattern that has emerged today in a lot of the digital cameras as well. Same concept in a digital. Nikon, Canon, Minolta, Pentax, lots and lots of companies made SLRs. Now, when you buy one of these, you're going to also have internal light meters, and in most cases, everything else is kind of manual. Nikon and Canon and some other companies did produce cameras like these with more automation from about the mid-80s onward, and you'll start to see Canon Rebels and Canon EOS cameras that were film cameras, and those were produced before our modern digitals. Those look different from these, and they use different lenses, and they have autofocus. Same for Nikon. These are both manual focus, and I like these cameras because they take you back to basics, force you to do everything yourself. Makes the job harder, but it also makes it more rewarding. And they're just kind of fun to shoot. They're very affordable. The Nikon camera without a lens is $125, and I've got a lens on there that I believe costs about another $80. So for around $200, you can start out there. The Canon comes with a lens for $225, so it's very affordable. And if you're a first-time shooter, these are the kind of cameras that you might want to consider if you don't want to expend the budget and you're not looking for a particular design. You just want a good, solid camera to start shooting some film. These would be perfect. If you're going to buy between the brands, I don't have any problem with the quality of either one, but we have a whole lot better access to lenses with Nikon film cameras. I don't know why, but for some reason we always have dozens and dozens of these beautiful lenses. And coincidentally, these lenses in many cases can even fit the modern digital version of the Nikon. Not your entry-level digitals, but some of the really nice high-end digital bodies will take these lenses. So it's fun to work with older lenses even on modern cameras, and with Nikon you don't have to have adapters to do it. With Canon it's the opposite. There are a lot of cameras in our store that you could look at if you're interested in film. So I just brought a small assortment today to look at. If you're curious to see what is available, I would go and look at our website, precision-camera.com, or you can call me at the store and talk to me directly about what's available, and I can kind of give you some advice about what you might want. Our inventory changes daily, if not hourly, because at this rate, people are buying these things up with all the spare time they've got. Film is fun to shoot, gives you something to do. We have great resources when it comes to developing and printing and scanning. And if you want to get an idea how that works, I'm going to switch over and try to show you what you might see online on our website. Because right there, that's our page for film processing. There's a link up here, Photo Lab, and you just click on the link for film developing, and you'll see the prices listed for each of the different kinds. And you can definitely choose options once you get into one of those fields in terms of cutting your negatives and do you want a high-res scan or a scan at all for that matter, and printing. So our website's beautifully set up and designed to make that process really straightforward. And as far as how that goes with film, well, you can mail it in or you can drop it off curbside. We're doing curbside pickup with film. Or you can come into our store. We're asking customers to wear a mask for sanitary reasons during the COVID situation. But we take in and develop film every single day. So one of the specials we're running right now is a great deal on color developing. And this might be something you would want to try if you're just getting started with your film photography. Let me see if we can see that better. Okay, so it's $3.99 a roll for 35 millimeter or 120, and it says C41. Okay, C41 is color, color negative. And color negative, again, was, like our standard Kodak and Fuji films. So maybe you want to shoot through a few rolls of this and see what it looks like before you delve into the scanning and printing aspect. Well, it's $4 a roll to scan, and then you can check your negatives or print selectively what turns out. I recommend if you're starting out, order a low-res scan at least if you don't want to print all your photos, because that scan's good enough to see what turned out. I prefer the ultra-high-res scans from our lab, mostly because you can see the film grain. They're so good, and you have no limit on how much you can enlarge. But if you want to try developing some film, we have a special product discount code, processed by PCV, that you can use online or in store to get the special $3.99 price. We have plenty of film in stock in our store right now. So if you come in, you can go to our photo finishing counter, which is at the very far end of the store, and deal with some of the nice folks who work there, and they can give you some advice or help you with your film order. We're used to folks who come in and maybe they haven't done a whole lot of this, need some coaching or some recommendations, and we're happy to discuss those things. It's no fun to talk through a mask for an hour and a half, but as far as getting the point and understanding what you need, we'll get right into that and help you so you don't have to spend all day in our store trying to figure things out on your own. And as far as the aspect of camera choice, camera selection, there's a lot to account for if you're trying to choose one of these. I will personally help you and guide you through that process if you come in during the Monday through Friday business hours. I'm usually here on the sales floor and ready to help, and I would be more than happy to give you some sense of what I might recommend based on the particulars of what you like to photograph and how you do it. It can be a little complicated to just read specifications, and remember, these aren't digital cameras, so the quality of the camera is largely based on the lens and the kind of film you shoot. So a lot of it has to do with kind of how you handle the camera and what kind of optics you choose, more so than the camera itself. So as far as that goes, it's fun to shoot film. If you've never done it before, I would highly recommend you try it out. And we've got a lot of inventory options today, a lot of different cameras in our store that we can look at. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes we run out of these things. And lately, a lot of people have been buying them, like I mentioned. So, if that's something you want to do, get on the ball, come on down, give me a call, or look at our website for listings. If you have questions, we have a lab that can even talk to you over the phone or through email. So if you're interested in getting in touch with somebody, you can call our general line, and there's an option when the phone picks up to go to the lab, and the photo finishing department can answer questions directly. I can usually figure things out, but if you have questions about developing and printing, go right to the lab and talk to those folks, because they're going to be better at answering those questions than I will, in terms especially of giving you pricing and a good idea how long things are going to take. We'd love to say everything's going to be ready in an hour, but sometimes film processing and scanning can take a little longer than that. Anyway, Precision Camera is really excited to be set up to help and support our film community. And I personally love the fact that I can come to work and pick up a roll of Tri-X and bring it back and develop it and get beautiful scans made. And if I want, I can make a print 4x6 all the way up to a poster. So I've definitely been the beneficiary of that working here in the store. And if you are willing to make a trip and come in, we're happy to have you. Precision Camera is open 7 days a week, and you can find our business hours online. Thanks for watching Facebook Live. My name again is Ian, here to help if you need me. You have a great afternoon. Enjoy your photography, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.